for that. Okay, so I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Nhan Truong. Nhan is a social psychologist and public health researcher with expertise in substance use, addiction, and mental health disparities among youth, LGBTQ, and BIPOC communities. His research includes longitudinal and community-based studies examining the psychosocial risk and protective factors that shape substance use trajectories across diverse populations. Nhan, I'll go ahead and pass it to you.
Thanks, Aspen, for the introduction. So I just wanted to, before talking about this um, presentation, which is based on a study that was done when I was a postdoctoral research fellow at San Diego State University's Graduate School of Public Health. So just to clarify that it's not has nothing to do with my current affiliation with Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine. So hi everyone. Today, I'm going to be discussing about how something as simple and powerful as warmth can shape young people's health outcomes. So this talk is grounded in research, but it's also about real lives, real relationships, and how connection can protect against addiction. Also, this presentation is based on a study that was published in the Journal of Alcohol Addiction. So you can you if you want to read the technical paper, you can look for it, and it'll be there. I'm one of the co-authors. So why does this matter? So alcohol addiction affects millions of young adults, but not all young people face the same risks. So sexual minority youth, meaning, and the way we define them in this study is when they identify as mostly heterosexual, lesbian, gay, or bisexual. So sexual minority youth are more likely to struggle with alcohol-related problems. Uh, resilience isn't just about avoiding harm, it's about feeling connected, supported, and valued. So if you know about the Phoenix model, this is very much related to it, and I'll talk about that. I'll connect that with the Phoenix model later on. Um, just to give you a brief overview of the research that have been done, the literature out there. So while most studies that examine disparities in alcohol addiction between sexual minority and heterosexual emerging adults, meaning those who are ages 18 to 25, those studies have focused on risk factors such as bullying and this study examines protective factors. And we wanted to test the case that healing comes from connection, that it's not just about prevention. So if you know about the Phoenix Sober Active community model, um, it's centered around connection, and it's about how people bounce back from tough experiences, not just by being strong, but by having the right support. It breaks resilience down into three types of catalysts. One are the actor catalysts, which include family members and mentors. Another is psychological catalysts. So your sense of hope and your sense of positive identity. And a third are environmental catalysts. And that involves like a feeling of being in safe spaces. So all of these types of catalysts can are foster resilience. Um, and this study explores specifically warmth as a protective catalyst. And I would also make the argument that warmth, in general, would they foster all three types of catalysts that I talked about as well. So what is warmth? Warmth is more than just kindness. It's feeling loved, being told that you matter, and knowing someone um, knowing that someone believes in you. It can come from your family members, but it can come from teachers, coaches, and mentors. Any adult who shows up consistently in your life and supports you in various ways. Warmth is a form of emotional scaffolding. It helps young people build resilience. So, just a bit about like what studies have looked at around warmth. So longitudinal studies have found that both familial and non-familial warmth from earlier periods in their life course were connected to lower alcohol use in later periods, including emerging adulthood. But they haven't specifically looked at how familial and non-familial warmth during childhood and adolescence has an effect on later emerging adulthood in terms of alcohol use. Um, and another, like, studies have looked at alcohol addiction as an outcome from other comorbidities, such as mental health disorders. So, like, combining alcohol addiction and mental health disorders, and how warmth um, um, has an association with those two combined. But they haven't looked at how warmth affects alcohol addictions alone across time. So, so for this study, we looked at how warmth during childhood and adolescence affects the risk of alcohol addiction in early adulthood. We define childhood as before age 11, adolescence as ages 11 to 17, and young adulthood or emerging adulthood as ages 18 to 25. This isn't just about how much someone drinks, it's about whether drinking becomes a problem. In other words, like turning into like heavy drinking, turning into alcohol addiction. And so in this study, alcohol addiction was assessed in 2010 with items assessing symptoms based on the DSM-4, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual version 4, which is what clinical psychologists and psychiatrists use to assess and diagnose. And in the DSM-4, they were defined as having both alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence to be diagnosed as having alcohol addiction. So in this study, these were self-reported. So who are the young people in this study? We used data from the what's called the Growing Up Today study, which is a national comprehensive study that assesses children over a long period of time. It started in 1996, so what is that, like 30 years or something? And they've assessed over 16,000 kids aged 9 to 14 when in 1996. So our sample in this study included over 9,000 young adults ages 19 to 27. Um, Most participants identified as heterosexual, not surprising, but about 1 in 6 identified as a sexual minority. Sexual minority youth were a vital part of the study because understanding their experiences helps to build more equitable support systems. These identities were self-reported across multiple years, which allowed us to see how warmth or being provided warmth and alcohol use intersect with their lived experience. Um, the sample was predominantly white, which is a limitation, but it still offers valuable insights. And the reason, so not only that, the sample were children of nurses from what was called the nurses study. And so like the nurse, so that in that sense, the children who were participated in the Growing Up Today study are sort of skewed in terms of socioeconomic status, family background, and also they're mostly predominantly white. So we track their experiences over time, especially their self-reported sexual orientation and levels of warmth on alcohol addiction and alcohol use. So what we found was one, that lower receiving lower warmth during childhood and adolescence was linked to higher risk of later onset of alcohol addiction during emerging adulthood. Um, and those who had both provided both familial and non-familial warmth during childhood and adolescence had the lowest risk of developing alcohol addiction than compared to those participants who had only received only one type of warmth. Um, we also found that warmth did not change how much people drank, but it changed whether drinking became a problem. Um, and the reasoning behind this is that during emerging adulthood, the norm is heavy drinking. That's sort of the norm. And so like you don't really see, so then in that sense, we didn't find that warmth had an effect on heavy drinking during um, emerging adulthood. But it did change whether drinking became a problem or which we mean by as being diagnosed or having an alcohol addiction. Um, so and then also we found that sexual minority women, so among women, sexual minority women reported being provided lower warmth than heterosexual women. But among men, the differences were minimal. We didn't see any real differences in being provided warmth. Um, so this tells us that one, warmth matters, and that disparities in warmth may help explain disparities in addiction. Um, so yeah, so I'm not gonna go into like other explanations because I think we're running out of time. Um, in terms of the implications of warmth, so as protection, based on the findings, we know that even small increases in warmth made a difference in later onset of whether or not they had alcohol addiction or not. Um, and that warmth helped buffer or having been provided warmth was provided protection against alcohol addiction in later um, on when they became emerging adults, especially for sexual minority women. Uh, and and resilience grows through connection, not just through grit or willpower. So what can we do about this? So to support young people, uh, in terms of what it means for educators, clinicians, and advocates. We can create safe spaces where young people feel seen and valued. We can train adults to offer consistent warmth, and we can build programs that center connection, especially for marginalized populations like LGBTQ plus youth, um, who because they are more stigmatized, stigmatized or experience what's called minority stress, um, which are like stigma that are related, that are unique to their sexual minority identity. Um, they uh, there's even more of a need for building programs that center connection for these kinds of populations. And then also we can also that uh, we know that warmth isn't a luxury, it's a protective factor. And then final message that I have is that resilience isn't just about surviving tough times. It's about feeling loved, being supported, and knowing that you matter. And then finally, let's build a world where every young person feels that warmth, that kind of warmth, because it could change their trajectory around alcohol addiction. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Nhan. Um, Jackie, you're up. We're gonna kick this off for kick off the question and answer portion. I had a question already in the chat, but I feel like you can go first. So
Well, I think, so I'm Jackie Helios, Deputy Executive Director, co-founder of the Phoenix, and researcher. I am really excited to have you here talking about warmth. I think there were a couple of things that came up for me, and I'll build on the question in the chat because um, we're looking a lot at this concept of mattering. And you even said it at the end of your presentation that mattering matters really, right? And I'm curious, how did you measure warmth and how is that different than mattering?
Yeah, so we measured once by asking the participants whether they were provided praise from like so for for like from family members and then also for non-family members expressions of praise, love, uh, making them feel like they feel special, that they mean something to them, and not just matter, that they just matter. So it's like we had like specific sort of um, construct around what we mean by warmth.
Great. Well, thank you for that clarification. Um, and I think, like you pointed out, connection is at the heart of the Phoenix model. It's really about connection paired with a welcoming, safe, supportive environment. That culture and that environment is really kind of where we see this almost agent of change. Like if you can change the norms of the culture, that can contribute to the way in which people feel, the way in which people behave, and can help with the quality of connection. Um, can you speak a little bit to that in terms of like, did you all think about the environment or was it strictly looking at the relational kind of warmth that was
Yeah,
between the people?
yeah, we didn't. That's like I that was like in our discussion around like future research. So like one of the interesting findings was that among women, we found that sexual minority women had reported that they experienced less. I mean, they we found that they experienced less warmth than heterosexual women during childhood and adolescence. But with men, there were no differences between
Yeah.
sexual minority men and heterosexual men, and we're thinking that it has to do with how during childhood and adolescence for girls they are like more strict in terms of like the way they behave in terms of like gendered behavior, gender expression, than for boys. And that might be why um, girls that sexual minority women experience less warmth among both family members and non-family members. And that has a impact on later onset of alcohol addiction. And we've got there's studies. I mean, like I think there's a good or robust literature that shows that sexual minority women, especially, are more at risk for um for like having alcohol addiction.
Did y'all control for a history of trauma or experiences of trauma when you were looking at warmth?
I I don't think we did.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
And I'm also curious if when you're looking at whether it was from family members or others outside of the family, did you go a layer deeper to look at maternal warmth, paternal warmth, grandparents or was it just categorized as family more broadly? It was.
Yeah, I think these are such great questions. And so we these were also addressed. A lot of what you were asking were like addressed uh
Discussion.
in the discussion as future
Yeah.
research. We could have because we did ask like in the questions like broke it down by like for family members, siblings, mother, father, guardian, adoptive
Yep.
parent. Yeah, but we didn't actually examine that in this specific.
This first day, yeah. I,
Yeah.
I see Christy Porter has a question. Do you want to come off mute?
Sure. Hi, I'm in San Diego, so
Oh, okay.
yeah, not fall here. Um, but anyway, I'm curious whether you talk about these are like experiences of warmth. These are self-reported
Yes.
as opposed to, so it's their perception of whether they received warmth,
Yes. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which,
Everything was
is
self-reported.
complicated.
Yeah, and the other thing is that these are like they're asking. Some of these are like asking them to recall when they were, a child and then when they were adolescent, um, and during emerging adulthood. So we did like um, so there are some like where that could be a limitation to the study, but yeah, all of this was self-reported. Do you have like a specific question around that?
No, I'm just
Oh,
thinking about someone for various reasons might say, my parents were always cold. Their sibling might say the opposite.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's no truth there really,
yeah. But
right?
I think that what matters is what they felt,
Of course.
and their perception of having received warmth, because that's what has is going to have an impact on their later, onset of whether or not they're going to like, have, develop alcohol addiction.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions out there? Well, before we go, I'm curious if there might be one thing that you might share with the community here at the Phoenix that you think we might want to, like our members or our volunteers might want to think about, as part of the community in a way in which that they can factor in warmth into what they do.
Yeah, I think that one, it's not too late to provide warmth to people, like your loved ones, um, because that will have a positive impact on them, and in this case around alcohol addiction, or I mean like also around other types of substance use addictions, because there are some people, as you know, who did not, those who did not receive warmth during childhood and adolescence. That doesn't mean that they're fated to be, maladjusted or like have um, other um, problems, that it's not too late. And also know that like warmth is an important factor in substance use addiction. in preventing substance use addiction. So I think that's sort of like the big takeaway I would like to give.
Well, thank you so very much for joining us here today and for sharing your research with us. Any other questions before we close? All
Is there
right.
anything in the chat?
I don't see anything. Let's see.
I was just going to reply to Grant's comment
Oh,
about
Grant.
mattering because Grant, I'm curious, and this is just like me rattling this around in my brain, and I know you can, if there's anyone I can ask, it's you. Do you think someone has to have because you said mattering is the foundation of resilience, but do we think someone has to experience mattering to then become resilient? Or actually, I'd say maybe I'm being like really philosophical with my thinking here, but actually, is it the absence of mattering and experiencing like adversity or suffering that then actually fuels resilience further?
Are
Oh,
you
I don't
asking
know.
me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, like life is hard for everybody, right? But it's about how can we find, as I wrote in my response, like Erickson talks about these dynamic processes of adaptation, growth, and change. And like that's actually what resilience is, rather than, going to the ocean and trying to hold back the waves, right? It's more learning how to surf, right? And I think that mattering is like in some ways I was thinking about what Jackie said about the Phoenix context, right? About or Beth said, like or you said, Beth, right? Like being a volunteer, being a friend to someone, having someone you can say hello to. If that's what mattering is, right? Being sort of contextualized in your relationship with other humans in a way that's like continually generative. If that's kind of what mattering is, then that's the foundation to like having the behaviors, processes, relationships, activities, connections that allow someone to practice resilience. Because resilience is like really a process. It's a series of actions. It's a method of responding rather than being fortified in some way. Right. And that thing that people say that like what we avoid controls us, right? Like as a person in substance use recovery, I spent all day being like, I am not going to use drugs today, right? Like my entire life, whether I used or not, would be built in every moment about like a sort of a fear response to that object. But if my life becomes like, I am going to connect with as many people as I can today and like learn new things and grow and allow my favorite thing about the Phoenix, right, is what we do is we take something that people carry, which is this sense of identification of somebody who's been affected by substance use, and we allow them to enter into spaces where that very identification allows them to be a part of something bigger than themselves and to grow in that moment and to like do things they would not have otherwise done, which like totally like creates this massive amount of cognitive dissonance between what it means to be a drug addict in society or what it means to be a drug addict in light of stigma, and also what it means to be like a person in recovery in a Phoenix city. So yeah, I think that, and like, both like in a micro level and a really macro level, Phoenix, like being a person in recovery, like really matters, right? Like it matters for the people in your group. It matters for having a shared experience. It matters for the strengths of our partnerships. It matters for our strength in our relationships with donors, right? It matters in the way that we're like changing society and fighting stigma. Like being a person who's been affected by substance use matters in a way that it doesn't in a lot of other spaces. And like even as a 12 stepper, like I see what it does as a massive social movement that occurs like a lot, like in church basements and saves a lot of people's lives. But does it have the same capacity to like have conversations like this and take conversations like this to a bigger level, or to like actually create social change, or to like welcome in people who might not feel safe in those environments? No. And I think that's what's really magical about this place that Jackie co-founded and you and I work for, and Nhan's presenting to today, and we have like some members attending too, it seems like. I think that's what makes great. And this meeting itself is sort of, for me, like a process of resilience. So thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
I also
Well,
like what, oh, sorry.
oh, no, you go ahead.
I was thinking about other like people from other cultures, like in my culture, for instance, where in the family we don't show any signs of affection. We don't show we don't ever say the word love. We don't hug. We don't kiss or any of that. It's done in a it's showing love is done through action. Like recently I visited my mom and she like gave me an envelope with $2,000 and I'm like, Mom, I don't need this. You need this more than I do. She's like, no, take it because that's how she showed it's through action. Um, so I wonder if it warmth is defined differently um by culture. And does that have the same effect or impact than like from what we found in this study? But for like cultures like Chinese people and other East Asians that don't, where their families don't show, that type, what Americans or Europeans define as warmth.
I think what you point out there is a really good challenge of like our research methods in themselves are flawed because they don't always account for cultural differences. And so if the question is saying, did you receive a hug as a child? And actually that wasn't the norm in your culture. If that is our only way of capturing that, we
Yeah.
are failing to look at how does this show up for different people, and that is based on our situations and culture and context. So it's a really good challenge.
Mhm.
I think it's really spot on too, and something that we really strive to call out. And you mentioned it as a limitation in your study that it was majority white. And I think that's a common bias that you see in research. And while it gives you a decent starting point, right, to think about concepts and ideas and then go out and prove that it actually is generalizable across different demographics and things. Um, it is something that, as a research industry, we have to pay more attention to. I think in the past it was, just written off as like, oh yeah, I'll just put it in the explanation as to why it might be a problem, but we can do better.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, we're really looking to figure out how to start to work that more into the sort of the ethos of research and how we do it, and hold ourselves accountable to it and our partners to it. And anyway, I noticed that in the both how you presented and in this post conversation, and I think it's just such an important point.
The other limitation, not just that they were predominantly white, but they also came from a middle to high socioeconomic family background because these were children from what was called the nurses study. I believe they started that study in the 70s. And these were like, it's a national study on nurses. And as it's no surprise that, nurses generally make more money. Um, and so that's another limitation. We're not talking about like children who grew up poor.
Right.
So they're very privileged in that sense. They're white and middle high to high socioeconomic family background.
Yeah. Well, I am going to bring us to a close. I know we're about 10 minutes over, and I think we do this all the time. And one of these days, we're going to make our sessions a little longer. But it's been great, and it's just a reflection of how wonderful the topic is and how much we love talking about research and thinking intellectually about how we can apply the learning into the everyday and how we can actually change how research is done to do it better. And so I'm really grateful to have had you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I will just give a quick close in here too. We actually did schedule this for 45 minutes. So
Oh,
yeah, so we're good. We're like perfect
Oh.
on time for the first time ever.
For the
So we'll
first
take
time.
amazing. I guess I just assumed. I didn't realize we had changed it.
No,
So
we made a little bit of change here. So yeah, we're learning. We're learning every time we do it. I'll go
amazing.
ahead and stop